Jaya Radha Madhava Sripad, Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Statar Saptashi, Srimad His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Statar Saptashi, Srimad His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai, Sankirtan Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Pranandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. So the class goes until 6 o'clock?
6:20.
6:20?
Yep.
Okay, we'll see. I'm not sure. I'm not going to go longer. Maybe a little shorter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Today we're going to read a text from the 11th chapter, the Universal Form, text number 49. We do this responsibly? We do. Do I read it and everybody else? Mate vyatama cha vimudha bhavo. Drishtva rupam gauram idrin mamedam. Vyapeta bhipritamana punastvam. Tad eva me rupamidam prapasya. Mate vyatama cha vimudha bhavo. Drishtva rupam gauram idrin mamedam. Vyapeta bhipritamana punastvam. Tadeva me rupamidam prapasya. Mate vyatama cha vimudha bhavo. Drishtva rupam gauram idrim mamedam. Vyapeta bhipritamana punastvam. Tadeva me rupamidam prapasya. Anybody like to read the verse? Nobody? Make it roll. Let's go for it. Okay. Ma, let it not be. Te, unto you. Vyata, trouble. Ma, let it not be. Cha, also. Vimudha, Bhava, bewilderment. Drishtva, by seeing. Rupam, form. Gauram, horrible. Idrik, as it is. Mama, my. idam, this, vyapita, be, free from all fear, pritamanaha, pleased in mind, punaha, again, tvam, you, tat, that, eva, thus, me, my, rupam, form, idam, this, prapasya, just see. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. You have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished, my devotee. Be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form you desire. Please repeat. You have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form you desire. Purport. In the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was worried about killing Bhishma and Drona, his worshipful grandfather and master. But Krishna said that he need not be afraid of killing his grandfather. When the sons of Dhritarashtra tried to disrobe Draupadi in the assembly of the Kurus, Bhishma and Drona were silent, and for such negligence of duty they should be killed. Krishna showed his universal form to Arjuna, just to show him that these people were already killed for their unlawful action. That scene was shown to Arjuna because devotees are always peaceful, and they cannot perform such horrible actions. The purpose of the revelation of the universal form was shown. Now Arjuna wanted to see the four-armed form, and Krishna showed him. A devotee is not much interested in the universal form, for it does not enable one to reciprocate loving feelings. Either a devotee wants to offer his respectful, worshipful feelings, or he wants to see the two-handed Krishna form so that he can reciprocate in loving service with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Krishna Swami Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Srinivadi Goschacha Vancha Kalpatarascha Kripasindu Evacha Patitanam Pavanivyo Vaishnavi Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I became inspired to read this verse this evening, initially because I find these words spoken to Arjuna are very moving. I imagine that one day, after having become exhausted with the material energy, after having chanted in so many kirtans, after having heard from so many saintly personalities, and after having received so many blessings, after finding the balance of spiritual life, chanting on our japa, all of the things that we do that define us as devotees, other than the fact that we're already devotees. It's already our constitution. But this grand effort going on to leave the material world behind, at some point it will happen. At some point, the real thing will manifest within the heart. The actual love for Krishna as a person. And then, when that time comes and that happens, when the appropriate moment arrives, one day we'll be with Krishna face to face, just like Arjuna. And in that moment, I imagine Krishna saying something like this. Keeping that in mind, let me read it to you again. You have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form you desire. This material world is one of Krishna's features. It's one of his forms. And the form that was revealed to Arjuna cannot be seen by anybody. It can only be seen by a devotee who has been blessed by the Lord with the transcendental vision to perceive that form. Same with Krishna's personal form, either two-hand or four-handed form. Nobody can see these forms unless Krishna reveals them. So Krishna gradually gives us transcendental vision in the same way that he gave transcendental vision to Arjuna. Can everybody hear me okay?
Anything a bit louder,
A
sir.
bit louder? Okay.
I request you to a bit louder.
Okay. I'm a little bit soft-spoken, but when I'm chanting later on, I'll make up for it. So, yeah, we, as Krishna gave to Arjuna transcendental vision, Arjuna was wanting to see the universal form of the Lord, and then Krishna said, behold the transcendental form, there it is, but you don't have the eyes to see it. So then Krishna said, then I will give you the eyes to see. And then Krishna could see the whole the universal form. And as we become involved in devotional service and we become, immersed in the practice of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna also bestows us with transcendental vision. The way that we see and perceive the world begins to change. It becomes Krishna's world. And all of the things that are within this Krishna's world, they all have a purpose for being there. And this transcendental vision begins by understanding what is the purpose of this world. Now, Arjuna got a huge dose. Prabhupada said in the purport, the purpose of the revelation of the universal form was shown. And that purpose, of course, was, it was quite a ghastly scene. Arjuna was worried about killing his grandfather and his gurus, and Krishna was revealing to him the nature or what was about to happen, which was really beyond Arjuna's control. So he got a glimpse of the purpose of the material nature. Of course, a devotee understands that the purpose of everything in the material world is to serve and please the Lord. But if one is not in tune with the actual purpose of the Lord and acting accordingly, there's another purpose. And that other purpose is the rectification of the conditioned souls through the churning of the material energy, the constant creation and annihilation of the universe, of the material bodies. And it's quite harsh if we think about it. if we really think about the nature of this world and what it is, it's like sometimes when we we could give a whole class just on the heaviness of the material nature and how it's a place of death. How often did Prabhupada refer to not only this world, not only this planet that we live on, but everything right up from Lord Brahma down to the insignificant ant. These are kind of like expressions that are lodged into the mind because of having heard them so many times from the spiritual master, from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. It creates an impression. So it all starts to make sense when we and it all starts to like become meaningful when we understand the source, how it's coming from Krishna. Not only does the material energy, the material world begin to make sense, but none of the spiritual teachings are really accessible in truth without a personal understanding of the Supreme Lord. Unless one can understand how this is all emanating from a divine person, then even the most elementary, what might appear to be the most elementary truths spoken in the Bhagavad Gita, they don't amount to much transcendental realization. And most of the teachings that Krishna gives, if not all, are embedded in the relationships that he has with his devotees. So if one cannot understand Krishna as a person and enter into the moods that he has with his devotees, then the teachings are also unavailable because they're contained within the exchanges of the devotees. For example, here in this purport, Bhishma Dev, he appears to be quite a criminal. He has not protected Draupadi, and although Arjuna is upset, Krishna is informing him visually that he's going to perish anyway. Prabhupada's explaining in the purport, because he did not do his duty of protecting Draupadi, therefore he deserves to be punished, he deserves to die. So if one didn't understand anything about the nature of Krishna as a person and his relationship with his devotee Bhishma Dev, then the valuable lesson would be lost. When Krishna chastises or when Krishna gives some kind of blessing or empowerment, it's the same, especially with his devotees. And when he chastises his devotees, or his devotees seem to be punished, it is a special purpose behind of that. Because each devotee is filled with transcendental qualities. And sometimes in order to display those transcendental qualities, Krishna has to polish in a certain way to have it revealed for the benefit of others and for the glorification of the devotee. So even though, in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is portraying Bhishma Dev as a criminal who deserves to be punished, at the same time, Srila Prabhupada also reveals to us the relationship that Bhishma Dev has with Krishna. Bhishma Dev wasn't, and all of these things are so personal that it makes it relevant to us. If it's personal, it's relevant. Let me just continue on this point using Bhishma Dev to clarify what I'm saying. That Bhishma Dev, he's in this situation of fighting on the side of the Kauravas because he, in order to please his father, who wanted to marry this beautiful queen, who became his queen, Satyavati, and his father was King Shantanu, right? So, we know the pastime. I won't tell the whole thing in detail, but King Shantanu wanted to marry this beautiful girl, but the father wouldn't agree because the father didn't want the children of Satyavati to be in a compromised situation where they would be minimized somehow, and he wanted the best for his grandchildren. Therefore, the best would be that he couldn't have them second to Bhishmadev. So Bhishmadev had to vow. He said, "Well, I won't marry." And then the father said, "Well, you you know, there may still be politics." So, first, actually, his first thing was, I will give the kingdom to the son. And then after that wasn't enough. Then he said, "Okay, well, I won't marry." And then that still wasn't enough. So he said, I'll always be loyal to the throne, whoever's going to be the king. And he also had to make this vow when he went back to the kingdom, because the ministers in the kingdom were worried, well, what if the son isn't qualified to be king? And so Bhishmadev pacified them as well by saying, no matter what happens, I will always be faithful to the ruler. I will be there and make sure that things are protected and going on well. So everyone was satisfied. And so he lived these vows, and these vows were tested in the course of his life. And during all of this time, he was trying to uphold his dharma, what he understood to be the truth, what he understood to be rightful action, and despite the difficulties. So here he comes to a situation where he's really stuck. He comes into this situation where he has a vow, but he understands that Arjuna, Yudhisthira, and all of the Pandavas are actually the pious rulers, and that they deserve the kingdom. But at the same time, fate has created this situation where he's bound to serve an unqualified king, which was his very vow to do. And he's trying to understand Dharma throughout this whole thing. And if we enter and meditate upon his situation in his personal life, it becomes relevant to us, because how often does this thing happen to us in life as well? How often does life somehow seem to split us in two, painfully, between what we know we now must do and what we know we do not want to do? How many times have we been in this situation? It starts perhaps as a young child. When we become at some age, we begin to understand what should be done and what shouldn't be done. There's some point that arrives in a child's life where they understand, no, don't do that. But then, they'll continue to do. But that's cute until you get older. And then it starts to be not so cute anymore. And it creates, situations in life. And life is such that we are put in constant situations where we know what is right, or we have a sense of what is right, or we have no idea what is right, but in any case we're forced to act. And in those moments, it can be very bewildering, such that we can even feel ourselves torn from the inside. If I were to say, who has ever had such an experience, I won't ask the question, but I'm sure there would be a number of hands going up. And if the hands didn't go up, either you're not revealing that or you have yet to. No one escapes. So, in those times when we are faced with dilemma in life, we can feel very alone. And, and in one sense we are alone in those moments, because we may take all the advice, we may take all the guidance that we have available, but at the end of the day we have to do the act, whatever it may be. We have to take the action, and then we have to also bear the results. And if we've chosen very well, those results bear fruit in the future that bring us some kind of good result. And if we choose poorly, then they still bear results. And this is what this is where we are. This is the material world. But in those moments, in one sense, we're very much alone with the situation and having to figure it out. Prabhupada gives us example about the time of death, that everyone has to fly their own plane. He writes this in the Bhagavatam. Everyone has to fly their own plane. The instruction is given on the ground. But once you're in the air, you have to fly your own plane. And it's kind of like that in these moments as well. But it's especially a lonely place to be if one does not understand the personal nature of the material, of where the material energy is coming from. That if one does not understand the personal nature of the Supreme Lord and has taken some time to develop one's relationship with the Lord, those moments can be extremely lonely. Excuse me. But if one is Krishna conscious, if one has tried very hard to develop one's relationship with Krishna and is aware of that possible relationship, then one's situation is very much like Arjuna, where Arjuna, in one sense, is alone. He asks Krishna to drive his chariot to the middle of the battlefield. He beholds the armies on both sides, and he feels the splitting from within. He's torn apart from within. He feels that loneliness, that despair. How is he going to be happy without his kinsmen, without his loved ones that he sees on the battlefield? How will he be able to live with the destruction that is about to take place? And in that moment, he's very fortunate to have Krishna at his side. And there's another kind of aloneness that is displayed in this moment between Krishna and Arjuna. Because Arjuna is the one who's going to decide. Even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that now that I've, he gives Krishna the option. Now you do what you wish to do. But just after Krishna reveals this whole universal form to Arjuna, and now Arjuna is having he's feeling the distress of the vision of everything that he's seen. And now Krishna is speaking this verse. He's saying, okay, let it be finished. And in that moment where the universal form is being shown, where is the battlefield? And after the universal shown is withdrawn and Krishna is standing there before Arjuna again in his two-armed form, again, where is the battlefield? Because as the discussion that continues after this point, after Krishna withdraws the universal form, what does Arjuna do? Now it's like, okay, we're back on the battlefield. I understand, I got it, which he did by this point. Now it's time to jump into action. Now all of a sudden they start talking philosophy. Meanwhile, they're surrounded by thousands of warriors, millions of warriors. And still the philosophical conversation just rages on between Krishna and Arjuna. So it's an example almost of becoming so absorbed in our relationship with Krishna, or in our service with Krishna, in our hearing about Krishna, in our reading about Krishna, that we actually begin to experience transcendence, where there becomes some almost some separation between oneself and the world of duality that's causing us such grief. And we can experience it in a small way or a big way, depending on how pure we're chanting. When we're chanting, when we chant, sometimes all of the things that are so giving us so much struggle in the material world, they somehow seem to dissolve when we chant Krishna's name. And in the same way, this whole dilemma of Arjuna, of whether he should kill his grandfather or not, or what's going to happen in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, seems to have dissolved. It seems to have dissolved, where he's standing face to face with the Supreme Personality of God and just having a discussion about philosophy. Now they're talking about devotional service, chapter 12, after the universal form. Is one, who is better situated, one who is engaged in pure devotional service or one who worships the impersonal, in an impersonal way? The first verse, right? So, we have a very special opportunity to sometimes, I guess one of the reasons why I was inspired to speak on this verse is because as devotees and coming in the line of Srila Prabhupada, we have had such a rare blessing to awaken this relationship with the person, the personalities, Shri Shri Radhamadeva. And I was just came across a Bhagavad Gita, because we do a lot of interaction with different groups, in Vancouver or otherwise, sometimes we get invitations to go and speak or do kirtan in places that aren't necessarily devotees. And in this one place they were reading a Bhagavad Gita, which I got a copy of, and I thought, let me see what they're reading in the Bhagavad Gita. And the author in the introduction was explaining how Krishna and Arjuna, they didn't really exist. That there was no discussion of the Bhagavad Gita before the Battle of Kurukshetra. That perhaps Kurukshetra was an event that took place that's written in the Mahabharata, but the author of the Mahabharata was a genius, and he wanted the people to read philosophy. So he took what he wanted people to know, and he just created this chapter, the Bhagavad Gita. He just stuck it in there right before the Battle of Kurukshetra, and therefore everyone would read it, and he knew that. I'm serious. I read this. Yeah.
It appears not credulous.
Not at all. No credit. He gets no credit.
It did happen, sir.
It did, yes.
Yes.
And the thing is, excuse me, from that point on, there's no shelter. There's no shelter, there's no access to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, understanding and how they are understood through the relationship that Krishna has with his devotees. Like, how can one appreciate that Krishna and Arjuna are actually standing on a battlefield speaking about bhakti in the midst of Arjuna's whole transformation from being in utter distress up into the point where he's now in rapture just hearing Krishna's words, just like King Parikshit in the Bhagavatam, who stopped eating and sleeping and was content for many, many days. So we see visibly in the Bhagavad Gita how Arjuna practically enters into this samadhi on the spot, where the external situation has dissolved And he is absorbed in the words of Krishna, trying to understand his relationship and then what he should do. And that's, in that sense, how Krishna has set up the scene of the Bhagavad Gita in order so that we can all benefit, because we are in the exact same position, and Krishna knew that. So it is the fate of the of the bhakti yogi to one day meet the Lord face to face, to ask Krishna to, well, whatever that will be, whatever that moment will be. But the bhakti yoga is destined to meet the Lord. And our whole practice and the sadhana of bhakti yoga revolves around this point. And Prabhupada says, I'll just read the rest of that purport. The purpose of the revelation of the universal form was shown. Now Arjuna wanted to see the four-armed form, and Krishna showed him. A devotee is not much interested in the universal form, for it does not enable one to reciprocate loving feelings. That's the point. Either a devotee wants to offer his respectful, worshipful feelings, or he wants to see the two-handed Krishna form so that he can reciprocate loving service with the Supreme Lord. That's what we're all about. I just find that this verse from the Bhagavad Gita really underscores the personal nature of our worship and our understanding of the Lord, and how one day Krishna will lift the veil of the material energy. And as we face life's trials, we should know that in those moments when we are faced with the painful decisions that we sometimes have to make in this world, the Lord is there, and we're not alone. And by reading and chanting, we'll be given the inspiration from within to know what to do. So I think I'll end there. Oh, I'm about 2 or 3 minutes early. Does anybody have any comment or questions?
So what is the purport of today's lecture?
The purport of today's lecture is that Krishna is a person. Of course we know this, but our worship revolves around that point, and that the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, or whatever teachings that Krishna gives, are embedded in the relationship that Krishna has with his devotees. In order to understand the teachings that Krishna gives, we have to understand how he reveals the transcendental truth in his relationships with his devotees. It's not just a dry philosophy. We're not the body, of course, and so many things, but the truth of devotion, of bhakti, becomes revealed in the relationships that Krishna has with his devotees. And of course, that is also there with the devotees as well. It becomes revealed in observing how devotees relate to each other. Is that okay?
Sir, I would like to know, whatever Lord spoke in the battlefield, was it heard by the army, both armies also? They were silent, they were not fighting when Krishna was speaking.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Was everybody witnessing and hearing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, or was it just Arjuna and Krishna?
Only two people were here.
Well, in the universal form in chapter 11, it appears that, Arjuna is seeing people fleeing this way and that way when the universal form is revealed.
But only Arjuna was seeing.
But only Arjuna was seeing, and Krishna says that only you have seen this form. You are the only one who has seen this form as I'm showing you right now. Now, whether or not he revealed what his other devotees were viewing at that time isn't described in the Bhagavad Gita. Perhaps there is a good answer to that. which I'm not
Because
available.
the universal form was seen only by Arjuna.
At least in the way that Krishna showed it to Arjuna, Krishna himself says that no one else before you has seen this form.
Both the armies
That-
were standing.
I'm sorry?
Both the armies were standing and seeing.
Yeah, both the armies were. Of course, I can't say. I have to, perhaps there's someone else who would like to elaborate, but I cannot say that nobody else saw or everybody saw. I know that Duryodhan, for example, couldn't see Krishna even though he was standing in front of his face. He couldn't understand that this was Krishna at all. So what to speak of anything else? The important thing about the Bhagavad Gita, though, is that what Krishna wanted to reveal to his devotee, we understand what is, taught to Arjuna by what, or what the universal form. We see through Arjuna's eyes, which is the whole point. We learn the teachings through Krishna's relationships with his devotees. Now, I'll just pause there for a moment. If anybody else feels the urge to offer more explanation on this point, now's a good time.
This
Yeah.
divine eyes, Krishna explained, I give you divine eyes, then you can see.
Yes.
So, other people don't have that eyes. How can see Krishna?
Yeah, it would reason that this was between Krishna and Arjuna, but I'm not saying that other devotees who were there also didn't see, because I haven't read anything that tells me that exactly.
This is specifically the universal form
Yeah,
we're talking about, yeah.
specifically universal form. I don't remember reading anything that specifically answers your question. So maybe further research.
No, but it looks rather surprised that how the both armies could stand for such a long time, and Krishna and Arjuna were only talking.
Yes, well, there was an etiquette. There was an etiquette that was quite strong. There was a time to start and a time to stop fighting, and I think that the armies were waiting for Arjuna and Krishna to return into battle formation before the battle was to begin. There was like an etiquette that was observed by the warriors. But again, we might have to leave that question for a time when we have a more substantial answer. I can't honestly offer more than that. But it is an interesting point to
We
meditate
have to
on.
depend upon history, sir. We have to depend upon history. We
Yes.
have to depend upon the historical facts.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have to believe that.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Yes.
Maybe Sanjay must have seen the universal form.
Oh, that's a good point. There you go.
He wasn't there.
Sanjay did.
We were seeing everything.
Yeah. That was good.
Different is Sanjay view and Arjun view is different. Sanjay just like we see movie, right? And Arjun see direct.
Mm.
So different is one is
And one would think perhaps Vyas would have been able to see as well, because it was because of Vyasa's empowerment that Sanjay could see. So
we getting there.
I don't know. We'll just say I don't know. But you're welcome to discuss. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.